Okay, so we've got Joyce Barrow, Steve Chalmley, Roger Evans, Robert Macy, Alan Mosley isn't here, Peggy Mullock, David Vasma and Les Winwood, James Walton and Daniel Webb. Joining remotely, we've got Councillor Julia Buckley, who's self-isolating but attending virtually, so I hope she's in good spirits and she's well. Andy Begley, Adrian Cooper, Steve Taylor, and that's it. So we've dealt with the apologies, which, just for clarity, is Alan Mosley and Julia's attending remotely. Item number 2, disclosable pecuniary interests. Has anybody got anything to declare? No? Okay, fine. Item number 3 is the minutes from the last meeting. Is everyone happy with the minutes? Proposer, please. Peggy, Joyce, proposed and second. Okay, are we all in agreement? Yeah, thank you. So, item number 4 is public questions. There's no public questions being submitted. There was a petition, the 20-mile-an-hour petition, but the petitioner has agreed to postpone the presentation until the new year to prevent any curtailment of the debate due to the pre-election period. Thank you. Right, item number 5, member questions. No member questions submitted. Item number 6, climate and ecology bill. We have Adrian Cooper, but I need to read this out first. Given we are currently in the pre-election period, it would not be appropriate today to debate the climate and ecology bill itself. This report is simply on the agenda to enable the appointment of a task and finish group to be approved in accordance with the motion passed at Council in February 2021. Therefore, the recommendation is that members set up a task and finish group to scrutinise the climate and ecology bill and to make recommendations as appropriate. Do we have any comments, or is everyone content? Just one question for Adrian. I was just asked a little bit earlier, Adrian. I presume that you will be heavily involved with the task and finish group.
I imagine so, Chair. Yes, that is what I would expect.
Yeah, okay, fine. Thank you very much. Roger.
Thank you, Chairman. I note in the report, and it is in the report, that the Council passed this motion in February 21. Why is it only coming to this committee now, when the committee has met several times since February 21?
I'm not in a position to answer that question, Roger, so I'll get you a written response. Okay, so if we move on now to item number 7, financial monitoring quarter 2. And if we could ask James Walton, do you want to speak?
Question,
yeah,
Chairman, and I welcome Steve here as a member of it, but as an executive member who produced this budget, should he be participating as a member of this committee or as an observer? I'm not sure. And I welcome Steve, but the rules say that if you're an executive member involved in making the decisions, you should not then scrutinise it, as I understand it.
Well, all I can say is that Tim Collard is very aware of the members, so if there was a problem he would have said. Amanda, do you want to just expand on that?
Yeah, my microphone's not working. No longer an executive member, Chair, now a chair of scrutiny.
Okay, so Steve is no longer an executive member. That's the advice Amanda's been given. So again, if you want to ask more questions, I suggest you ask them with Tim Collard. I don't think he's on the call, is he?
Sure.
No. Okay. James, do you want to expand on that?
I've made here just one quick point. I think the point's been raised by Councillor Evans, so I think that's now people are aware of that position. In relation to Councillor Chalmley specifically, there were no decisions have been taken on the budget as things stand at the moment. So in terms of cabinet approval of a budget position, certainly going forward, has not been agreed. So therefore, participation will be on as a scrutiny basis. But as I say, at least the point has been raised, so people are aware of that, and if there are any issues, they can be picked up as we go through as necessary.
Okay, thank you. So we're on item number 7, financial monitoring. Do you want to speak to the report, James? It's a quick introduction.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll just give a very brief introduction. So this is the second quarter financial monitoring report. So these are produced every quarter and approved by Cabinet. At Q1, there was a new concept of a control corridor was brought in. This was because the level of uncertainty within this year's budget and the implications of things like COVID, etc., had the potential to materially impact on the projections to the end of the year. So the most positive kind of projection came out at just under 2.6 million, and the most negative was just above 9.7 million. And at Q1, the estimate then within that control corridor was around £7 million. That now at Q2 has improved, so there's been action that's been taken on the back of that position. And we're now looking at an anticipated £4.363 million overspend, and the details of that are set out in the appendices of the report. But it is important to say that we have retained that control corridor. We've reviewed it and considered it, and there's no significant changes that will be made within that. So we're leaving that as it stands. So we could see those figures, those projections increase as well as decrease over the remainder of the year. But clearly, management action is being taken to try and bring it closer to that £2.6 million overspend, which was the most positive of those projections. In relation to the capital programme, it's been a difficult year in relation to coming out of some COVID restrictions at the early part of the year, and the implications and the impacts that have been had in things like supply chain, as well as availability of staff and materials. So at this point in the year, halfway through the year, we are just under 24% of the programme is currently being delivered, and details of that programme are then set out in the report. Each quarter we will review that capital programme and shift projects forward and backwards as necessary to reflect the work that's actually been done over the year. And there's also a mention there of capital receipts in relation to the funding of the capital programme. We are confident that the current capital programme for 21-22 is funded, but moving forward into future years that becomes more difficult as we have more assets that we need to liquidise. I won't go into the detail of the report, but that's the overarching summary. But I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to ask a question first, and then people can put their hands up. So you're introducing this control corridor. I think it's called a financial control corridor. I think it's called B. How's that going, and how exactly does it work?
Thank you. So one of the concerns that we've had in trying to produce forecasts is that there are a number of detail elements that we can build up from the budget in relation to levels of expenditure, levels of income generation, etc. And those you can give a reasonable confidence to the projections that are around them. I think what we found in last year, particularly in the 2020-21 financial year, was the impact of COVID. We had to actually separate out an element of the budget and said, this is COVID-related expenditure, and we're going to have to make the assumption, and we were quite open with this, we have to make the assumption that all of that expenditure which is over and above and couldn't be anticipated, will be funded by a separate level of government funding. Now, as we progressed over the year, we made a number of points through to government directly in terms of that funding is insufficient. And by the end of the year, the level of funding that came through was broadly in line with the level of expenditure that we incurred. Moving into the 21-22 financial year, there was an overhang, or a number of overhangs. One, in relation to what funding would be made available by government. The second element was around what new restrictions would be put in place or existing restrictions would continue on. The third element was around what were the implications outside of directly COVID, but on the way that the world operates. What would those look like, and what other issues and considerations could potentially fall on the authority? Because we have been effectively operating under something like emergency conditions since the start of the 2020 calendar year. So the idea was that we would take all of those bigger macro elements and we would try to, in some way, project those and estimate what the impact of those would be. In doing that, the most positive gave us a level of overspend, and the most negative gave a bigger level of overspend. So it was working between those parameters. What's difficult within that is to select which is the one that it is going to be, and because that student got a choice to be made, that's why we came up with the concept of the control corridor, so we could just give those best and worst scenarios and then work through it as we go through. But fundamentally, we still have those high levels of uncertainty within the financial projections that we had at the start.
Okay, have we got any hands up? Yeah, David and Roger. Okay, just another question that somebody asked me the other day as well, and then I'll go David and Roger. Has all the COVID funding been allocated, and do we predict losses in income where the support has been withdrawn?
Sorry, I missed the last bit, sorry.
So we've had COVID monies, now the COVID monies have gone.
Yeah.
How are we performing? Are we expecting losses, or are we actually holding our own?
So, as it stands at the moment, I think we've had around about £7 million worth of unring-fenced COVID funding that was provided, and against that we've analysed expenditure, which is suggesting that we will use all of that money, but we're not overstretching it at the moment. There are other, there's a whole series of specific and ring-fence grants that relate to all different elements of business expenditure. There's funding around individuals, around test and trace, and the comp funding. There's a whole series of those grants. Each of those are being monitored within the service area specifically to identify the costs and the generation of any work on the back of that. As it stands at the moment, we are expecting, our aspiration is to spend all of that funding within Shropshire and ensure that as many benefits can be delivered from that ring-fence funding. But we have to be mindful that it is ring-fence, that there are terms and conditions that relate to it. So unlike the unring-fence funding, which we can ensure we can spend over the year, where there are those conditions related to a particular grant, we have to make sure we fulfil those. And as we saw last year, where we are unable, or we reach the border of how far we can go with that, then some of that grant had to be returned to government. So we're not anticipating significant amounts or any at the moment to be returned to government, but not all of that grant is spent, and elements of it are available to spend through to March 2022. So we also have to be mindful that we don't want to use it all up in the early part of the year and then find that we get to February, March and are unable to fund certain elements of that. Okay,
thank you. David, you've got your mic on, ready to go.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, and my question relates partly to what James was reporting on, really, because I think there is an element of that, the unring fence money is being used to finance staffing. And people have been transferred across, employees being transferred across, and that they have been funded through that unring fence grant. Now, that's not going to go forward, I assume. But I mean, you was reporting that there are parts which have not been all spent. So will that be used in future years so in next year, for example, to fund staff? Or are we, and also obviously going beyond, there's that element, there's staff who have been funded through COVID will now come back onto the council's books, if you like, in terms of funding, and what implications that have. Because if you take out that element, obviously the overspend would be about 6 million or so. I just would like you interested in comments on that.
Right, Chair. So absolutely staffing costs have been charged against the unring-fenced grant. There have been additional costs in relation to it, and there's also been a shift in kind of the work patterns of people that have they've undertaken work over the last 12 months, and that's been referenced within the COVID grant funding. In terms of the ring fence grant, then that will only be for specific work that's been undertaken, and that will often be additional staffing or staff that have been seconded across specifically to work on a particular project or piece of work. So the two things go hand in hand. So in terms of the ring fence element, if there is a requirement for those staff to continue to do the work that they would need to do, then that would need to be funded by a further grant in the future. So that would be the expectation around that. In relation to the unring fenced grant, yes, staff have been charged against that, but that grant is not assumed for the 2022-23 financial year or further. So therefore, in terms of the budget plan for 22-23 and beyond, none of that funding is assumed. So if there is a funding gap as a result of that staffing not being able to be charged, that would be reflected then in the budget position, and there would need to be work done to close that gap on that basis. So there's no assumptions that grant will continue.
Just on another point, Joe, just I think it would be useful really for us to discuss this in this report in advance of the cabinet discussing it. And I don't know what other members think, but I just feel that we should be discussing it first. Any implications and any comments which we agree can be forwarded to the cabinet. I know this was discussed. I did raise this at cabinet, and Councillor Gwynn Butler did say that comments could go forward afterwards, but it seems ridiculous, really. It seems that if there are comments to be made, we should be doing them now, and then referring them to the cabinet before they have their discussion.
Yeah, and sorry. And I think that's the plan, David. In fairness, we're getting closer. It was just because of the situation that we're in that the dates had to be the dates. So in future, it's envisaged that it will come to us first. And I think you make a valid point there. So thank you. Roger.
Thank you, Chairman. I can't see, but are there any cabinet members online or listening to this? Because I'm disappointed that the cabinet member who presented the financial monitoring in Q2 was here this morning, but is he with us now?
I understand that I think Willem's got his booster jab booked this afternoon or something. I did speak to him and he was very apologetic that he couldn't be here. So,
are there any other cabinet members? Because we are a scrutiny and we're supposed to be doing this, not scrutinising the officers, and I'm grateful that James is here to answer the question, but it should be the cabinet member who is answering and assisted by the officers.
Well, I can only apologise for that, Roger, but I can ask Willem to come to our financial task and finish group, our next financial task and finish group meeting, if that would help. Have you got anything, James?
I think the only thing I would say, I've been presenting the financial monitoring reports as an example for more years than I care to remember to the Scrutiny Committee, and I can't recall the portfolio holder being there more than once or twice over that period. I think the the point is not that they are, whether they should or shouldn't be here. I think it's more around if they are invited to come along because there are specific issues. At the moment, there has not been a request that I'm aware of that has asked for portfolio holders to be here automatically for these reports. They do come through regularly. It could be organised if that's what committee wanted. So my point is not whether I'm in favour or not. I'm currently ambivalent in relation to that. It's just to say that historically, cabinet members have not come along to the Performance Management Scrutiny Committee to be challenged on these issues. It's tended to be a challenge of the information and more understanding and scrutinising of the information contained within the report, which officers have dealt with in the past.
Congratulate James on doing this job, Chairman, but historically the cabinet members did used to come to these. This council was formed in 2009, and originally and for some time cabinet members did come along to it, and it's only in recent times that cabinet members failed to turn up for many scrutiny committees. But I'll go on and answer the questions I've got on this, and they are there, and I'm disappointed that no member of the cabinet is here when we're looking at Q2, which covers the whole gambit of the cabinet and the overspends or recoveries that have been done. But I'm picking up where Councillor Vasmer first started. According to how I read it and the scrutiny report, at present, at the end of Q2, it was predicted to be £4.3 million overspend. But on top of that, if we look at the vacancies, which are quoted as saving money, and also the 800,000, nearly £900,000, which is paid out of the COVID fund to officers who have been seconded, that adds up to just over £3 million. So actually, we're nearly £7.5 million adrift if we were not paying some staff out of the COVID fund, and we had a fully employed workforce. So as I say, so 4.3, yeah, but it's really a lot, almost double that is where the council are at present. I also note in the report that monthly updates for the executive directors is given where we are into December, and the budget is being brought by the cabinet in 14 days' time. Can the director give an information on what the latest position has been given to the executive directors, on what sort of position are we in? Are we improving the £4.3 million overspend, which is quoted in this Q2? Is that improving due to management action, as is quoted in the report, or is it getting worse, better, or whatever? Because we, as a scrutiny committee, and I've said this morning about the task and finish group with finances, we should be better informed as per what the government legislation says. We should be looking at the budget. We have no idea where we are with the budget, only what it is at the end of September, and we will be looking at a budget predictions for next year. We need some preparation for it. So in the reports to the executive directors, is it an improving situation or a worsening situation, please?
Okay, James.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so just taking the first point in relation to the staffing, absolutely valid what's being said, but it is also a circular argument. Effectively, because we have the COVID grant and because the expenditure is there, we charge it to the COVID grant. And as I said earlier to Councillor Basma, in relation to the implications for the 22-23 financial year, we have made no assumptions about grant. So would there be an overspend if the grant wasn't here this year? Yes, but the grant is here, so there isn't. So there are all sorts of adjustments we could make. If we theoretically took things in around, the fundamental is that that's where we are this financial year, and going forward we've not made any assumptions, so therefore that's a valid position to start with. In relation to the monthly reporting, yes, the reporting is produced monthly. There was a period of time when we did take the performance monitoring, the financial monitoring to Cabinet on a monthly basis. That did happen for a period of time. What we found from that was that there wasn't significant value added by producing that on that regular basis, and actually, in a sense, some of the value was taken out by it effectively appearing on almost every single Cabinet meeting. So by producing it on a quarterly basis, that gave a much more informed position in between times. In relation to the report that's here is quarter 2, so that's period 6. That takes us up to the end of September. Period 7 takes us up to the end of October. So at the close of that period, at the end of October, work is then done by all of the budget holders across the council to input their forecasts based on the information they have through November. So that information then is available in the early part of December for the executive directors team to consider and discuss. So as we're just at the start of December, yet we don't actually have those period 7 information, that period 7 information. So the period 6 is the latest information that we have at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, in fairness, Roger, I think, we haven't delayed the timings. The timings are what they've always been. So you can't make it any quicker than the process allows. Anyway, next question.
If I can pick that up, Chairman, what we're saying is that the Director of Resources does not know what the position of the council is since September. He does not know whether it's getting better or getting worse. Is the £4.3 million improving or getting worse? Because I didn't ask for figures. I just asked for it. Is the situation for the council improving or getting worse in the report to the directors? I understand it's a report in preparation and we may not be able to see it and all the rest of it, but I would just like reassurance that the £4.3 million is not getting worse. That's what I'm asking for, and then I have some other questions afterwards. Thank you.
Right.
So if you
carry on, then,
if you'd like me to come back to that, Chair, I can't answer that question until the monitoring position is understood for the organisation as a whole. Even if I'd got 95% of it now, and that was improving or worsening, it would still depend on that remaining 5%, because that may be a material consideration in relation to where we are. So we are regularly monitoring this information, but I can't give an update as at today until I have the complete picture.
Okay, yeah, carry on, Roger.
Well, thank you, Chairman. In the quarterly report, it mentions Shire Services and the trading of it, and it's showing £602,000 in the red, and it stipulates where some of those are. Where are we with the shopping centres, all 3 shopping centres together? Are they providing any income to the council, or is it just 0, or even worse, less? Because we did put an investment of over £50 million into those shopping centres and some money since. So what sort of return are we getting, or is it predicted to give during this financial year?
Through you, Chair, so in terms of the shopping centres, we've split those 3 areas up now, so that the 2 areas in relation to Pride Hill and Riverside are now seen as developmental sites, and those, as you'll be aware, are not trading as retail units, and therefore they are very much an economic regeneration project at the moment and are not generating income. What we're looking to do throughout that process is to ensure that the costs related to those are minimised while we undertake the process of reimagining those 2 centres and or reconsidering use for the land. In relation to the Darwin centre, which is trading, that in itself, I believe the latest figures were that it was something like 97% full now in relation to the retail units that are there. Now, the fact that it is full doesn't then necessarily mean that all of those units are paying full rent or whatever, because there are shifts into it. There are all sorts of commercial arrangements in place with individual units to ensure that we have a longer term viable position going forward. So while the monitoring position at the moment is very much about that transitionary period, I think we can all accept that if we've got one shopping centre which is pretty much 100% full going forward, that is likely then to be generating significant income for the authority, which is a helpful benefit. And the other two areas are, as I say, going through a period of regeneration, and therefore would not be expected to be making any income in the short term. All of that is reflected within the monitoring report and within the conversations that we have at the moment to develop the budget for next year.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just ask a question, just to split it up a bit. So the legal costs for children's services, pre-pandemic, pandemic, and now, what are the pressures? Because clearly we've seen a lot more looked after children and a lot more legal work. Can you just give us a bit more information on that, please?
Thank you, Chair. So the detailed explanation would clearly be provided by somebody within children's services, because that fundamentally is the driver for this cost. So what we've seen is the numbers of looked after children, the numbers of children accessing children's services in one way or another has increased over the pandemic period, and there's always been a concern that following the significant lockdown periods, that there would then be a kind of a period where stalled kind of demand would then come through, and we'd see those numbers rise. We've also seen with the change in the dynamic over that period that more sort of complex referrals have come through. So issues have been picked up perhaps not by the normal channels or the usual channels that they would be, therefore that sometimes comes later, that sometimes comes with more complications. All of that then leads to cases that find themselves in court to work through that. We do have a dedicated team in legal services, but the cost of providing that service is very much reflective of the level of demand within children's services, and that level of demand is significantly higher than it has been, and so at the moment we have a service that is running very, very hot at the moment, is struggling to keep up with demand, and therefore additional costs have incurred in bringing in additional staffing just to try and manage that situation. We're looking to see whether this is a longer term phenomenon or something that perhaps will some of that demand will reduce in the short to medium term. If we do believe that it is a longer term, then as part of that we can look at alternative ways of providing that childcare support on a legal basis. So the model we've got at the moment fits with the previous kind of regime. If that changes, then we'll need to change that model.
So basically, there will be a pressure in Q3.
Yes. Absolutely. That's the projection based on assumptions for the remainder of this year. So that's not the cost at the moment. That overspend is what we're projecting based on the way that we are anticipating demand to go and how we will manage that over the remainder of the year.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Roger.
Thank you, Chairman. If I can go on shopping centres, and I quote from the report: as fundamental changes in the retail sector continue, Darwin Shopping Centre has been subject to several pressures, including negotiating less favourable lease renewals, tenants leaving, and delays in relocations from Pride Hill. These ongoing pressures on the budget have created an estimated reduction projected reduction in income that totaled 386,000. What was our projected income from the shopping centres? We've got 386,000 away from it, but what were we predicting would be our income for this current financial year?
I'd need to go back and get the detail on that, because the original figure from memory for the 3 sites was 2.7 million pounds. Clearly, that was subdivided across those 3 sites, and the reworking is. I need to look at that reworking to see what the actual figure is for that particular area, just in terms of income return. But again, the point you've made is absolutely correct. We will have a short-term position in place. What was more important was getting a strong retail offer within the Darwin sector, and that could be at the cost of short-term benefit, but it's for the longer-term security of that site.
Yeah, I mean, that's that against a 97% occupancy rate, which should be congratulated on, because that's very good. But Julia, do you have any questions? I see you waiting there patiently.
No, I'm fine, thank you. Just following the debate.
I've got you there now, yeah. Sorry, what did you say?
I'm fine, thank you. Just following the debate, no questions.
Okay, fine, thank you. So, have we got any questions? Yeah, Les, because I was going to say, Roger, otherwise it's going to be the Les and Joyce, and then I'll come back to you, Roger.
It's very sad, Chairman. Very sad, Chairman, to see that the homelessness has doubled during COVID. Obviously, statutory duty for us, but B&Bs are a costly exercise, and I just wonder, moving forward, how we're projecting or hoping to rehouse these people and look after their situation by other means, because obviously that cost is got to be borne by this authority. I just wondered what is the way forward with this, because you could still, other than the COVID, it isn't going to get any better in the foreseeable future.
Yeah, okay, can I just follow on from that? Actually, I think we've been doing a really good job, but the reality is we're getting, I think, 150 quid a week from the government, and some of the homeless accommodation is £150 a night. So it is a pressure, and it is to the people who've been delivering the service. I think
it's a difficult area, because when things do actually accelerate like that, it isn't easy to find people's a room for people's accommodation, and the staff have done wonderfully well, but it is a worrying rollout, as it isn't going to go away for a while, is it? So things are going to get worse before they get better. I just wonder how we're handling it as we move forward.
And thank you, Les.
So, thank you, Chair. So, yeah, I mean, obviously, you're asking, the question is coming to me, and I'm answering often from a financial point of view, which is unfortunate in a number of ways. I mean, I think the important point is that the reason this overspending exists is because the service is providing housing to people who would otherwise be homeless. So the bit where I come in is the model that we're using one that is financially sustainable, and as the Chair said, that's exactly the position that we're in. If we need to get somebody into a bed and breakfast accommodation to prevent them becoming homeless, then we will do that. The way the mechanism works at the moment is whatever that charge is, there's a cap then in terms of how much we can reclaim from government funding, and the overspend that then creates on a person by person, family by family basis over weeks and potentially months is what hits that particular line within the budget. So work is being done across the organisation to look at alternative models, and we've spoken to and looked at other models in other local authorities and in other countries, in fact, to how we can manage this. The reality of the situation is that we need to do more at source and everything we can possibly do to prevent people becoming homeless in the first place. So there is other grants that we receive, and things like discretionary housing payments, for example, by exploiting and maximising the use of that sort of funding and welfare funding, all those sorts of elements within the resident Ben's team, that can prevent people becoming homeless in the first place. So that's upstream trying to make that happen. There's then a question mark about how much provision do we have within the county. What can we have ready for people to move into? Because ultimately, if we are, if we're able to manage assets that we own ourselves, then effectively the cost of covering that is the cost of covering it, and we can still reclaim the subsidy. So you're not then held to ransom effectively by the market in terms of what those charges are. You can tailor it much more to the funding that's available. So what we've seen is an increase in the number of homeless over the COVID period. But it was already there. There was already an element of this, and I think it's that shifting of the model away from emergency bed and breakfast kind of coverage into much more about temporary accommodation. There's lots of work being done on that, and there are sites that are coming online now. So we've seen these costs going down, but there is still a number that we need to work through before we'll get that cost down into balance.
Thank you, James. Could I just come back? It couldn't be a worse situation for people, and it's an awful situation to find yourself in when this happens. And the council, I believe, have done a great job in making sure that these people have been covered, albeit in B&B. But it's other models are definitely the way forward, because that isn't the satisfactory outcome in the end, is it, on a long-term basis. But it's a dire situation for people to find themselves in, and it's just gone, we feel so sorry that this happens to people. And it's as I say, it's done since COVID, which is not good.
Okay, thank you. So I've got Joyce, Roger, and then Rob Macy, and then I think we'll have done it.
A couple of questions. First of all, our social care budget, you can just update us on where we're at with that. And the other thing is about our assets. We own a number of buildings. Are we making the most of them for them to feed into this? And I particularly like to ask about Morrison site in Oswestry, because I assume that will be costing the council money because it's sitting empty. And is there any way of getting income from that? Are there proposals for that? Thank you.
Okay. New Chair. So update in terms of the social care budget. I think what's interesting is there's been a narrative for a number of years where we all understand the pressures within adult social care. We understand the demographic growth and the increase in complexity in those areas. And we also are aware, again from a financial point of view, around the modelling that was put in place, the levels of growth that are necessary to go into adult social care to ensure that we meet that demand. Within the service areas, fantastic amounts of work is done to manage and monitor that overall position. And what we're seeing is that in the last few years, although the growth has been allocated on the basis of the model and necessity, what we're seeing as we get closer to the end of the year is that actually we're able to manage within that growth figure. So it's a difficult one, because we're putting more and more money into adult social care, and then we're saying we're able to underspend, and we're not really underspending at all. We're just spending less of the increased cost, if that kind of makes sense. And there is more that can be done, but some of those those key statistics around the numbers of people that are being diverted into more appropriate arenas rather than falling straight into the council is massively helpful in terms of having to manage that overall budget. With the adult social care bill and the discussions that we've had today, that would be interesting to see where that takes us, and what the future implications of that will be. There are serious concerns and risks associated with our ability to fund adult social care in the future, not only on the existing model, but what that could mean in relation to that revised model. but until we understand the detail of that, it is just a work in progress. But the good news is that fundamentally we're looking much closer to balance within our services than we have for a long time. In relation to the assets, yes, we have a programme. There's about 5 different categories in relation to our assets, whether they're held for administrative purposes, whether they're historic monuments, whether they are held for commercial purposes, and all sorts of different categories that are provided under that. The site that we have in Oswestry around Morrison's, I think the agreement that we had there ensured that when we took that site over that there wasn't an additional cost. So even though the site is empty at the moment, there's not a cost that's falling to that from the authority, because there was a buyout clause in relation to taking over that site. So there is now an opportunity to develop that site in the future, which would potentially then generate income or be used for various different purposes. I haven't got the detail in terms of where that is at the moment, but I know it's not a financial liability sitting on the council.
Chair, can I come back on that? Chair? Can I come back to that?
Yeah, I'm just a bit, we are in a pre-election period, so I'm just a bit sensitive about these questions. And I would say that James has gone far enough. I don't know if Andy would like to comment. Andy Begley?
Yeah, I think we've just got to pay attention. We are in that period running up to the by-election. I think it's important that the business of the council continues as much as it can. I just think we just rely on each other really in order just to make sure that we're not pushing the boundaries of that. As we all know, it's a sensitive time, so I think I'd just appreciate everybody taking their own personal responsibility around that as well. So grateful for the attention you're paying. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Joyce. So I've got Rod Macy and then David Asma. There you go, Roger.
Thank you, Chairman. Got 2 questions and one on capital. Can I just pick up one question following an earlier question? On page 23 of the actual report, revenues and benefits 1.3 million, forecast loss, and then contribution from unring-fenced COVID funding 1.3. That's where we're talking about, and it's the unfortunate people who we are having to look after. That's where that cost is. So I couldn't understand why the 1.3 net loss, but then there's 1.3 balancing from the unring-fenced COVID funding. That's what that is it? Or is there another explanation for it, please?
So part of the COVID grant has been applied against housing benefit subsidy loss. So because we cannot claim more back from the government in the short term because of the increased numbers of homeless, we're then charging some of that against the unring-fenced grant.
Yeah, I've got no problem with that, Chairman. It's just that we can identify there the thoughts that are previously asked. It shows the volume and the effect it is having on the residents of Shropshire, which would be all over the whole of the United Kingdom. So it is our thoughts are with those. But come back to questions, Chairman. I see on the Shire Services section on page 13, there is a reference there, and I'll quote what it says. This area has a £401,000 savings target, which is currently projected as unachievable. And in addition, the area's budget review process, further deficits of 221,000 have been identified. Is there any update on that, please?
In short, no, not really. That's the position as reported. Work's being done within the area, but I don't have a detailed update on that.
On the revenue side, Chairman, and again, it may be something James may not at present, but it needs to be highlighted. I noticed that all councillors had a email this morning about the care fees review, which is going on, and we may get letters back from different parts. Are you factoring that into the new budget proposals? Because from what I read of it, it may well affect next year's budget. And I see where we are at present, but I'm looking into the future a little bit.
I can't personally answer that question. What I can assure you is that all those conversations involve finance business partners as part of the standard process. So any implications will be good to come to.
My last one, Chairman, and this is on the capital programme. I see under children's services, there's 2, 4, 6, 7 items there, and it's on page 33 of the report. It shows vast underspends are useful, but then there's a 1,191% overspend on unallocated schools capital. Is there a reason behind that? Because there were plans, obviously, to do some of the items above it, but they are 0.8%, 0.7% as of the end of September. That's after the school holidays. So that's when a lot of maintenance and new work is being carried out. So is that included in it? But then there's, as I say, nearly 1,200% overspend on the unallocated, which is what, 5.7 million.
So through you, Chair, there is there is an error in the in one figures there. You can see that it's hashes that the figure isn't shown, so we get that corrected. In relation to that unallocated school capital figure, that is where the expenditure was showing at that point in time. Some of that will be reallocated to other areas. Some of it will be around budget shifting into that area. So while that overspend is shown against that line, it's a direct reflection on the fact that there are much smaller levels of expenditure in other areas, and that unallocated is showing as a huge overspend because there's a reallocation of budget and expenditure that needs to be undertaken in that area.
Okay, thank you. Rob?
I only had a couple of quick ones. The first one, when you were talking about temporary accommodation, I'm assuming that the new homelessness strategy that's in development will have detailed costings attached to that, specifically around that area of temporary accommodation and others, I'm guessing, when that comes forward. And I suppose the only other thing I was noting was that the capital programme was the 71 affordable units that are coming forward at Paul's Moss, which it only feels like it's that sort of scale of development and that will ease pressure on the system. So I'm guessing we're also going to be looking for other opportunities like that going forward. But yeah, it was just checking there will be a full set of costings with the homeless strategy really that's coming forward.
Yeah, so those calculations are undertaken. I can't at the moment confirm what information will be in there, but certainly the underpinnings of that would include all of that information as you suggested.
Very quick.
Fine.
Very quickly, Roger, because you know you don't know.
And it's a question a little bit about housing, and just been reminded of a question I asked a little while ago, and no real answer was possible at that time. But there are other housing developments which Shropshire Council's Canovi is actually doing, and one of them was quoted as being that they were not able to do what we would expect as far as carbon reduction because of the return that Shropshire Council were wanting on the money that they had loaned to them, which was a fair percentage, and each development had to stand on its own feet, and due to some reclamation work that needed to be done on the land, it was not possible to fit photovoltaic cells to the roofs and things like that. Is there any comments or anything that we can do? It's part of the budget, it's part of the income that the council gets on its money that it's invested, but the percentage that was being charged on that loan was quite high in my opinion.
I think we're straying a bit here, Roger.
Why?
Okay, because that is performance related.
Oh,
and I think we're going to be doing a lot more on performance, and we're going to have some much better performance indicators. So I think that's probably for another day, and also given the circumstances. So I see you giving me a wry smile there, Roger, but that's it now. No, no, I think we'll leave it. I think we've done that now. Right, David Basman.
Yeah, just one last point, Chair, about the presentation of this information is that there's a lot of detailed information here, and very often we're interested in the items where there's been overspend. And is it possible when this report is prepared, is you have a section which actually highlights the actions which are proposed to deal with problems? I mean, for example, in the housing, you've got some proposals in the housing section. There's other bits and pieces proposals here, there, and everywhere, but it's quite difficult to keep track of that and for the future reference to actually say, well, in the Q2 report, this action was proposed. What's happening in Q3? Has that been developed, or whatever? I'm just thinking in terms of doing our job as a committee, whether the information could be presented in a way which actually highlighted some of the actions which are outlined in this report. I mean, some of it, it's a very detailed report, very useful report, but I think some of the actions get buried, and that's what we ought to be looking at. We ought to be looking at those areas where there's been overspend, where action needs to be taken. We need to monitor that, whether that action has actually been taken. It's quite difficult, given the way in which this report's presented, to actually be able to do that.
Yeah, and again, I think it's the same as I said to Roger, really, David. I think we're working at getting better performance indicators, and I think that will work better for the officers and for ourselves, because it's fair, fair dues to James and Toyin and the financial staff. They've done a great job under very difficult circumstances. We can always do things better, smarter, but I do think that things change, and we definitely need to improve the way, improve our performance indicators, and I think that'll be helpful for us and helpful for them as well. So I'm going to draw the debate to a close now. I'm going to propose from the chair that we just note this report. I think that's the only thing we can do. Do I have a seconder? Steve Charmley. Okay. All those in favour? Anybody against? No. Okay. Thank you. So move on to agenda item 8, which is the performance monitoring report. So I'll hand over to James just to give us a brief overview. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So again, this is the Q2 position based on the council's performance. As I think has been said previously, we are currently in the development of a new structure plan, and therefore the performance measures and the performance management framework that will sit behind that new corporate plan will completely change the basis of this report. And I think I reported at Q1 that Q1 and Q2 would be very much based around the existing corporate plan and the existing measures that were within that, and that's reflected in this report. 23 measures, 12 have shown improvement in performance, 6 at the same level, and 2 have shown a decline, and there's detail around that. But going forward, and it may be from Q3, it may be towards later in the year, Q4 and into 2023, we will start to then see the measures then starting to reflect those priorities within the new corporate plan. Within this particular report, there's a focus been drawn on the adult social care outcomes framework, and so those details are specifically detailed within the body of the report. But as always, there is the link there through to the in-phase site on the council's website, which provides then more detail around those particular performance measures. Reference has been made to the number of indicators that don't have targets. That's been acknowledged and accepted. There are a number of areas that don't have targets at the moment. All of that will be taken forward as part of the development of those new measures. And but for transparency, we showed all of that information so that at least members were aware of what information we do and don't hold at the moment, and therefore consideration can be taken of that position. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I must say, I think it looks like the general Shropshire economy is recovering very quickly, which is good. And actually, I do look forward to working with you and the others on the performance, because I think, you know, there's lots of ways in which we can present a whole lot more information that is quite relevant to all of us. I think we've mentioned a few today, but anyway, Steve's got a question.
Yeah, it's more of a comment than a question, really. You know, I must admit, some of these performance monitoring figures you do get glossed over a bit, but having had a chance to sit here and troll through it in more detail than I normally would, there's a lot of positives here, and there's not much which you could pick on and say, you know, that is truly awful. You know, you reference the economic recovery, which is, you know, a considerable achievement considering, you know, we've just come through COVID, etc., etc. Yeah, you would expect visitors to libraries and, you know, the theatres to improve, and you know, long may it continue. But interestingly, the claimants count's going down, and there was the children's one which I can't find now. You know, children's referrals is down, which kind of surprised me a little bit. I don't know if there's any more background behind that, but I thought coming out of COVID we'd maybe seeing a rise in that rather than a fall. So just comments more than questions.
Thank you, Steve. Did you say you had a question, Les?
No.
No. Okay, Kirky, have we got any more questions? Rob, have you got a question? No? Okay, right. Well, I think we should just, if we've got no more questions on this, I think we ought to note this. And I really look forward to doing some work in the future on performance indicators. And perhaps some of us could get together and get a list of the most important indicators, that, you know, the things that would help us. And I think we're going to be looking at all this in, I think, next March, because there are, as we speak, there are key indicators being designed. So I propose we note the report. Seconder there, Les is seconding. Is everyone happy with that?
Yeah.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is item number 9, the work programme. But given some of the questions this afternoon, I'm going to suggest to Daniel that if you've got anything he wants to talk about the work programme, that you email him direct. Yeah, I think that's probably the best given the circumstances that we're in. Has anybody else got anything else they wish to say? So it just leaves me to wish everyone a very Merry Christmas, hopefully a safe and healthy one. I hope Julia either hasn't got it or gets back very quickly if she has got it. And take care, everybody, and see you in the new year. Thank you. Thank you. Right. Switch that on.